Murphy and Stephen Elliott calling the action. This hour, we'll review the Sunday papers very shortly with Vincent Hogan and Marie Crowe. The text number is 53106. You can tweet us at Off The Ball. Nathan Murphy is standing by. Hello.
Can you hear me? Hello.
I can hear you, yeah.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear.
Okay, so here we go. Manchester City inching ever closer to a title, I said there, Nathan.
Yeah, Liverpool are basically running out of games for Manchester City to drop points in. It's been a strange title race over the past month because neither Liverpool or Manchester City have gone behind in any of their games, which is sort of made for a lack of drama. You want to see what would happen if City went behind in a game. That it would give a glimmer of hope. It would add a little bit, I think, to this title race. But they've just been relentless. 11 wins in a row and have never really looked like slipping up at all. Burnley are safe. They don't have a whole lot to play for, but generally here at Turf Moor, they like to make life difficult. And if they can hang on in there for an hour or so, maybe a few nerves will creep into this Manchester City side. And I guess that's probably as much as any Liverpool supporters can hope for.
Recent history, Manchester City have beaten them 5-0 in their two most recent meetings.
They have. They crushed them both times this season in the FA Cup and at the Etihad Stadium earlier in the year. But Burnley have this strange record where they have beaten the reigning Premier League champions in every season that they've been in the Premier League. So they did it to Manchester City back in 2015. They had a 1-0 win here. George Boyd scored the only goal. And, well, listen, it will be the shock of all shocks. The thing to remember is that City don't need to lose a game. They just need to draw a game if Liverpool win their final two matches. And to finish the season, if they do it, with 14 straight victories. No team has ever done that before in English football history, gone on that run at the end of a season, with the pressure Liverpool have generally put them under, because Liverpool tend to have played first in this title race. Well, it just backs up everything we said about City last season as well, just how good they are. 157 goals they've now scored in all competitions. They're still looking to be the first team ever to win all three domestic trophies, and when you look at the talent that's in that side, you'd have to say they probably deserve those sort of accolades. But they've got to get through these games. Leicester are obviously dangerous against top six teams because they're very good on the counter-attack on Monday week, and then it looks as though there's not going to be much at stake at Brighton because they should be safe by the final day. So maybe this is the toughest test that Manchester City are going to face between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, on the stats point, there's various pieces across the papers today starting to talk about what City are on the cusp of achieving. So Jonathan Northcroft is talking about 198 Premier League points across 2 seasons, 296 goals. He says they're doing to team stats what Messi and Ronaldo do to individual ones. And he goes through various players in the team, like Sterling, for instance, 23 goals, 17 assists from 47 games, which equals what he did last year when they said that was unrepeatable. Bernardo, for instance, is going to play 50 games for a third consecutive campaign. And then Sergio Aguero, in some respects, doesn't get the credit he deserves.
No.
So he is 1 goal away from reaching 20 Premier League goals. This would be for a 5th consecutive campaign. Only one other player has ever managed that. That was Thierry Henry.
Yeah, what Sergio Aguero's done in his time in the Premier League doesn't get enough appreciation. It's strange because when we talk about greatest ever Premier League teams, we get a little bit nostalgic and maybe don't realise what's right in front of us right now, because Sergio Aguero seems to rarely come into that conversation. He's on 162 Premier League goals. He's currently 7th in the all-time list, and generally if he stays fit, if he plays over 30 games in a season, he scores over 20 goals. And you got to remember as well, 18 months ago it looked as though he was under a lot of pressure here at Manchester City, that Pep Guardiola liked the work rate of Gabriel Jesus. It seems as though Aguero has changed his style. He gets around the pitch an awful lot more. He's not just that out-and-out number 10. He's always dropping deep back to the halfway line. And he's become the ultimate Premier League striker. And he's one of the few players, I have to say, when you go around watching Premier League matches, he's one of the players you really look forward to seeing, because he can score any type of goal. Any type of goal, and he always seems to make some sort of an impression in the game. In saying that, he hasn't scored in his last 3 Premier League matches. As you say, he's on 19 Premier League goals. Raheem Sterling, interestingly, 17 Premier League goals. He's only actually scored in 4 of his last 17 Premier League games. Now, generally it's a brace or a hat-trick in them. When he's hot, he's very hot, but it's maybe something that maybe Burnley can latch on to. The team news this afternoon. Just the one change for Manchester City. Joe Fernandinho's out injured, so Leroy Sané comes into the team. It's a very attacking Manchester City side. Ederson in goals. Back four of Kyle Walker, Vincent Kompany, Aymeric Laporte and Alexander Zinchenko. Midfield of Ilkay Gundogan, Bernardo Silva and David Silva. Sterling and Sané on the wings. Sergio Aguero yet again leading the line. Gary Neville had suggested after the Manchester derby that maybe for a game like this you want to bring in Nicolas Otamendi and play Laporte at left back, because Ashley Barnes and Chris Wood, such a big physical presence up front, and they're both in smashing form. Barnes 11 league goals for the season, Chris Wood onto 10 for the season. They do lead the line again. Just one change for Burnley as well after their 2-2 draw against Chelsea earlier in the week. It's at right back. Mac Lawton comes in place of the injured Phil Bardsley. So Tom Heaton continues in goals. The back four of Loughton, Tarkowski, Mee and Taylor. Jack Cork and Ashley Westwood in midfield. Jeff Hendrick and the teenager Dwight McNeil in behind Ashley Barnes and Chris Wood. Kevin Long and Stephen Ward both among the substitutes for Burnley. No place in the squad at all though for Robbie Brady.
Lovely stuff, Nathan. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Joe.
Nathan Murphy on commentary alongside Stephen Elliott. 2:05 kickoff at Turf Moor, followed by Manchester United Chelsea at Old Trafford. Now we're going to turn our attention to reviewing the Sunday papers. We're on Facebook Live as well, and all our social channels, as well as the radio. We're joined in studio by Vincent Hogan, Chief Sportswriter with the Irish Independent, and sports journalist Marie Crowe is with us as well. Thanks a million for coming in. Appreciate it. We'll start with the headlines of the Sunday papers. So generally there's been a well-trodden routine over the last number of weeks, which is around Saturday evening, 6-7 o'clock, start checking Mark Tighe's Twitter feed to see if there's a big John Delaney story coming in the Sunday Times, and then wait until midnight when it's up on the website. So nothing too salacious or big this afternoon. He does still make the Sunday Times front page, but only in the form of a Shane Ross quote, which isn't overly dramatic and doesn't move the story on very much. Ross blows full-time whistle on FAI board. So Shane Ross is talking about the FAI board, and he's saying he wants to see the FAI board depart at the earliest possible date before the July AGM, is what Shane Ross is saying, which he had said previously as well. But there is a quote as well from Catherine Murphy, who's also on the Oireachtas Sport Committee, and she said she doesn't have confidence in the new plan set out by the FAI and Sport Ireland on Friday night. You might have seen they set up a review group to develop reform proposals. But of this, Murphy says, the problem is, do you take anything at face value from the FAI? It doesn't really give me any more confidence that Sport Ireland's involved. Sport Ireland have been wrong-footed by the FAI right through this. Basically, there are 2 FAI nominees and there are 2 Sport Ireland nominees as part of this group. Catherine Murphy not overly impressed with that. So that's the front page of the Sunday Times. Sunday Times sports section. Pretty good headline. Eurosceptics. Home defeat by West Ham makes Spurs the latest club to suffer Champions League jitters. A big picture of Mikel Antonio after West Ham's goal yesterday. Then we have the Sunday Independent, and it's the Rugby which takes the lead here. Murray injury concern cast shadow over Munster victory. Conor Murray was withdrawn just before kick-off. He was injured in the warm-up yesterday at Thomond Park. Munster beating a depleted Connacht 27 points to 14. And beneath that, Sarri of Chelsea saying, I can make Chelsea title contenders again. Then it's lots of Manchester United on the back pages. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer gave a press conference yesterday where he talked about sorting things out in the summer. Going is the headline on the back page of the Sunday Mirror. United will offload £200 million stars Pogba and Lukaku is their back page. Meanwhile, the Sun has bottlers. Solskjaer reckons top 4 rivals will choke. Then the Star, United in chaos is their lead. Ole warns players he won't be thrown under bus. Phelan holding off on director of football role, and club told to sign and not sign Star after scout mix-up. So it seems like things behind the scenes are a bit messy at Old Trafford. More Solskjaer here on the Sunday World. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, United boss, to get rid of the fame-driven money grabbers at Old Trafford. And Solskjaer said that he would get rid of the players who were driven by money or fame in explosive comments yesterday. And Kevin Palmer says, which could pave the way for the sale of Paul Pogba, is their conclusion. And then back page of the Mail on Sunday, picture of Pep Guardiola ahead of the game at Turf Moor. Turf war, pressure on Pep as City face battle in Burnley to keep Liverpool at bay, rather. And then a story we'll come to on the paper review at some stage today. We won't bow to online flack over grounds, says GAA President John Horan. This is in relation to the Nave Colm Kill story up in Donegal. there is no sign on the horizon of the GAA opening up club grounds to other sports, according to John Horan. They've done it for county grounds on the back of the Liam Miller controversy, but they won't be doing it for club grounds around the country. We might start on GAA. It seems the net result of today's coverage, Vincent Hogan, is that you might buy new football boots.
I just might, Joe. I still play a bit of five-a-side now and again, and the shoes I wear are in tatters, and I kind of would be half embarrassed at 59 years of age to walk into a shop and ask for new football shoes and get measured for them. But Mickey Linden has renewed my faith in the possibility. It's a beautiful piece with Marie Crowe in the Sunday Independent today, and it starts with Mickey, who is now 56 years of age, going to buy a new pair of boots last year. Now, the difference between Mickey and me is very stark, as anyone will see when they look at the photograph of a very fit-looking Mickey accompanying this piece. This is a guy who was still playing county football for Down at 40 years of age. And he still plays Masters football, which I think is over 40 in the GAA. And it's just a lovely piece because, you know, Marie now was saying she wouldn't really remember him, she's too young, but this guy was the Footballer of the Year in 1994 when Down won the All-Ireland. Wonderful corner forward. And he played Ulster Championship football for 3 decades. And there's a great quote from him here. If you think of the physicality this man would have faced, and to still have the appetite at 56 to be out playing football. But Dermot asked him, how did he survive in 1980s Ulster football? He says, you learned very quickly to look after yourself, and you learned to be fitter than that fella you were marking, and keep moving. Don't let him get close to you. That was one of the tactics I used. I am fitter than you. I can run more than you. Backs in those days, you got a lot of that, brackets, physical intimidation. But I have to say, there was no sledging. Never got any of that. So no one ever mouthed at him, but they'd take his head off happily. But it's a great piece, and a really, really, a lovely piece at a time when we're all kind of looking at very polarised issues in the GAA. And Dermot goes to a legendary figure who's still getting a lot of pleasure out of the game. He managed Mayo Bridge to 3 county titles, and they played lovely football. He went and managed Killeavy, and he says we couldn't do that. We more or less had to play the 15 men behind the ball type of thing. That, you know, so there's 2 polar opposite philosophies on football. But he's open enough to say he saw the players he had at Killeavy and said, I have to play one way with them that I could play the other way with Mayo Bridge. But it's a really lovely piece.
Do you know what? Something that was quite startling as well was that there would have been so many people who would have grown up wanting to be exactly like him, wanting to follow in his footsteps, and would have got their careers to a certain level and have now retired. And then you have him who's still playing. So you've all these people in their 30s who probably should be still playing but have given up the game for different reasons or not. And you made the point, Vincent, he's still getting so much enjoyment out of the game. And is it a problem that at certain ages people just give up the game for reasons that they think they should, or, you know, it's imposed on them, and, you know, their careers are cut short? And if they had kept going for a little bit longer, if they had bought that new pair of football boots, maybe they still would have.
Well, I think so, but also you'd have to bear in mind he's not a normal 56-year-old. He's an extremely fit man, and he was always ahead of the norm in terms of fitness, no matter what age he was.
The hook for the piece is that this year marks the 25th anniversary of Linden's pinnacle as a footballer. That's what's kind of prompted Dermot Crowe to do it. He was Footballer of the Year in '94. We're going to see him parade around Crowe Park.
Right, yeah.
The older we get, the more horrible that experience is, I think, for all of us. How can these be the 25-year team? The key question you might be wondering, is he still wearing Puma Kings in the picture? He absolutely is. He's been loyal all these years. You mentioned he played county football at 40. In sprints in county training, he was in the top 3 or 5, even at 40 years of age. And I didn't realise this. At 50, Mickey Linden competed in the Masters World Indoor Athletics Championships in Budapest. That was back in 2014, running in the 60 metres, having earlier set an Irish record, and he reached the semi-finals and finished 14th in the world at 50 years of age. So he's genetically gifted as well.
And also, Joe, he didn't want to go, and he says that in the piece as well. I felt I had a lot more to offer even at that age, and that I was better than a whole lot of people on the team. And in some ways I tried to prove that over the next few years when I was playing with the club, and that's what drove him on. Isn't that amazing that even at getting to 40 he still wanted to compete? He still felt that he competed, and also he's no bother saying it either.
You know, there can be a certain smugness about people of a certain age. broadcasting how fit they are. I think of Gary Clare, and when he used to be on the first tee with Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus, and he'd nearly do a Pilates session just to show how supple he was, and you're kind of looking at it and thinking, you know what, that's a bit of a pain watching you doing that, Gary.
Yeah.
But there's none of that coming out of this article. It's a lovely, humble article about a guy who just is not broadcasting the fact how fit he is. He's broadcasting his love of the game.
Yeah. No, I do. That's a great point to make. I do feel like Dermot Crowe is having to prompt him each time.
Yeah.
Say, what about that point you kicked at 55, which went viral? And he's like, sure, look it.
And do you know another thing? Like in the 90s, when like he was at his pump, like I was saying to Vincent, I grew up in 6 Mile Bridge in Clare, and it was all hurling. So a lot of maybe the football didn't seep in because there wasn't as many games on TV. There wasn't the internet. We didn't get to see as much. So like I wish that I had more of an interest in Gaelic football back in those days. But it was just all hurling for me, because especially reading back over it, I feel like I missed out a bit on seeing all those great games and those great battles.
Well, it's well worth the read. It's a lovely piece. And actually, it's one of those examples of a piece where the picture makes a big difference. And it's a shot of the Mayo Bridge Miners, who he's now managing, in a huddle. And he's standing outside the huddle looking off into the distance. It's a great photo and kind of captures someone still getting so much out of GAA at 56 and prompting Vincent Hogan to buy new boots.
And what kind of boots are you going to buy, Vincent? That's what I want to know. Puma Kings? No?
No.
We're not a Puma King man, no?
No.
What are we talking
I used to be a Gola man.
Gola, my goodness, yeah, okay.
That's going back a long way.
I'll hold the picture up for those of you watching on Facebook Live. You can see it there. So that's Mickey Linden and his Mayo Bridge team. Still football crazy after all these years is the headline. Now, someone at the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Marie, on page 8, next door to the Mickey Linden piece, is Shane O'Donnell, who you spoke to, reluctant star ready to shine again. Shane O'Donnell is home. We had heard he'd been at Harvard.
Yeah, he was there for 6 months doing his PhD in microbiology. I wasn't expecting him back. I don't know why. I just thought he was going to go and then he'd be captured by everything that is fascinating about Harvard. But he had the absolute opposite experience that I expected him to have, because he went to Harvard and realised how much hurling meant to him. I thought he was going to go there and forget about hurling because he's being so much in the spotlight and there's been so much pressure on him after scoring 3-3 in the All-Ireland final. But what was a surprise to me was also a surprise to him, because he said himself he didn't expect that when he arrived in Harvard, he had 2 Irish friends and he said to them, don't mention hurling, I just want to go and be another normal researcher in a lab and not defined by the hurling career that I've had at home. And within a few months, he instinctively found himself going back to pick up the hurley, to go out playing the game, to watching league games on streams, to listening to games on the radio. And that's not something that he would have done before, because he is not a sports fan, and he makes absolutely no apologies for that. As a kid, he never supported a team. He had no interest in football. The night that we met, or the day that we met, Man United and Man City were playing that evening, didn't know it was on. Like, just... Wow. He has no love for sport outside of the game of hurling, which is fascinating, because it's so rare with sports people that he says, like, as soon as the inter-county season is over, as soon as he gets knocked out, that's it. Like, he doesn't tune into other games, isn't interested in what's happening. But being over there and being away from him made him realise that he's part of something really special, and it means so much more to him than he realised, because he'd spent so many years of, I suppose, almost been burdened by it, always having commitments, always having to train, always having to work out and compete. And he probably had a perception of it that it was a burden, when actually it was something that he wanted to celebrate and enjoy. Getting up and watching league games, which he never would have dreamed of watching before, Clare FM. So he's doing a PhD in microbiology in Harvard. Yes. A sharp cookie. Very much so, and he gave me a little bit of an insight into his childhood as well. His mom is an accountant, his dad is an engineer, 3 brothers, all kind of science-minded, maths-minded, all very high achievers. His parents pushed him into sport. He said he wasn't interested in it. He mentions he used to play rugby, and he'd tell his parents there was no games at the weekend, so he didn't have to go play the games. He used to just go to the training. He played a little bit of Gaelic football, wasn't interested. He said his parents persevered. He played chess. He was a competitive chess player, and that really excited him. He played with his brothers at home, was in a club, used to play matches. Sport just wasn't on his agenda, he thought, but he ended up being a good hurler. Started off as a corner back, somebody put him up corner forward, and the rest is almost history. You know what's really striking about this, it's a really
really interesting piece, and what makes it so interesting is if you go back to that extraordinary Saturday in 2013 and one of the most spectacular All-Ireland finals any of us have ever been to, and I remember that image of him sitting on the pitch afterwards, and any teenage hurler looking at him at that time would have said, "Oh, I'd give anything to be Shane O'Donnell." You referenced boy band looks, and everything just ahead of him. But there's a quote here, and it says, "It was great for about 3 hours. Then it was just an unpleasant experience. Everything changed for me. The trajectory of my life changed, which is good. I'm very happy with where I am, but I couldn't do anything or go anywhere." And I had heard this, and I'd be very close with Davy Fitzgerald, and I always remember Davy's description of telling him in St. Patrick's College, I think about 2 hours before the throw-in, that you're starting. And this wide-eyed child looking at him, and Davy filled up with emotion because he could see what it meant to Shane O'Donnell. And in the next few hours, his life changes profoundly. And in this piece, you see him going to Harvard, clearly a really, really bright guy and a lovely guy to talk to, and actually trying to get away from that, and actually not wanting American students he came in contact with to even know about it. You think of him trying to explain eventually after 4 months there, well, this is what happened to me. One day in Ireland in front of 83,000 people, I did this, and it was just like a bomb going off in my life. It's a really, really interesting perspective on the teenager who walked into Croke Park as one person and walked out of it a couple of hours later as a completely different person.
Do you remember the pictures afterwards of him being at the charity match in Sixwell Bridge? Surrounded, couldn't get out of the dressing room, pushing, shoving, everybody wanting to be near him, girls screaming. It really was like the One Direction scene, and that obviously went on for him for the months that followed. He needed a police escort to get out of the club, and he's a shy enough guy, you know, as well. But you mentioned not wanting his friends new friends in America to know about that. He said he didn't accept them on Facebook for ages because he didn't want them to see the pictures. You know, it's very hurling heavy. He didn't want them to see that aspect of his life. And then when he eventually did tell them about it, he was embarrassed that he'd hid it because they gave him a different perspective on it, because they just accepted the achievement, what he did, and they weren't aware of the negative I suppose, impact that it had on him afterwards.
Because he does say, I don't like being so negative and I don't want to dramatise it.
And he was at pains to say that as well. And, you know, it was almost uncomfortable. But at the same time, I could see he was almost relieved to say, yeah, look, it wasn't that great. I found it difficult. I didn't enjoy it afterwards. And he also regrets the moments after the game when he got caught up in the interviews and talking to the journalist. He said he wished he went into the dressing room, and he said, like, if he could turn back the time, he would have spent those moments in the dressing room with his friends. Brendan Bugler was playing the box, and, you know, just being in that environment instead of standing on the pitch doing the interviews. That was another thing that he really wished he hadn't done.
We'd have been appalled if he did that.
Given out about it the next day.
I obviously told him, I mean, you did the right thing.
What an impressive fella.
Yeah, and a really nice guy, and even like he was reluctant to do the interview, and I kind of almost caught him off guard, which is like a little bit bad on my behalf, but I knew he was going to be at this event in Ennis, and I was down at home taking a few days off, and I got on to the people organising the event, and I knew it was for the club, and I said, look, can I come along and can I speak to him afterwards? And he was like, look, I don't really want to be appearing in the paper. But then he made the point as well, like, but I don't want to be the person that says no all the time either. Like, I need to strike the balance. So, okay, let's do this. And he did, and he opened up completely, and it was great.
I think he'll be happy with the piece. He comes across very well. He's not coming across like a brat saying, oh, I hated all the attention. He's acknowledging, look, I don't want to dramatise it, and it was great for my life, but I didn't enjoy it either totally. That's absolutely fair enough. On Harvard, by the way, if you're wondering, because I guess we all would, the facilities, as he says, are really good. The equipment, whatever you need done will be done. There are no funding issues. But he says when you're walking around Harvard Yard or trying to get to the epicentre of Harvard, it is underwhelming. He says the architecture generally doesn't blow you away the way you might expect. But he says it's the people that make Harvard, the way the people think. It's so impressive. It's great to be around them. The ambitiousness of them is off the charts. They don't think anything's impossible. It's contagious, a really enjoyable environment to be in. Harvard is more about the people than the buildings and infrastructure, which is a nice insight. Is he going back to Harvard, or is that TBC?
Like, to contrast with Mickey Linden, like, we're not going to see Shane O'Donnell still hurling when he's 40. You know, it's like he's going to focus on his career in a short number of years. He has opportunities to go back to Harvard to do a postdoc. Other universities internationally have been on to him about doing postdoc. So at some stage, I'd say, like, in the near enough future, in the next couple of years, he's going to make a decision on where he's going to end up, and that'll be it. So
it's actually interesting, the juxtaposition of that piece, and above it is Joe Brawley doing what I think Joe Brawley does best, and it's storytelling. And he's talking about a tribute night to a man, a former James Stephens club man, Liam Hinfey, who spent 15 years up in Dungiven in the Kevin Lynch's club. And I've been up with Kilmacud Crokes underage team in Kevin Lynch's club, and the passion for the GA that they have. And, you know, when you're named after a hunger striker, it'll tell you what their sense of nationality is. But this is a piece completely about fun and old-fashioned fun. Fan Larkin telling stories about digs he gave out in matches, and it's I don't want to be too Sunday Independent centric about our talking about GA today, but it's a really good GA package, I think, in the Sunday Independent today, because it's covering the Mickey Linden piece is lovely. This is a modern day star, and then up there some lovely stories from Dungiven during the week where Joe was MC.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope they're all true. He says he's talking about back in the day. On one trip, Brian Cody fell for my cousin Sheila Burke. Just don't sue us if none of this is true. On one trip, Cody fell for my cousin Sheila Burke. He was due to head out in the All-Star Tour on the Monday morning and missed the bus to the airport. I was comparing the night, and I said to Brian, imagine how that might have changed the course of history. He said, I'd rather not. It does sound like a great night to have been involved in, so good on him. And he bullies, is it Fan Larkin to tell the truth?
Story.
Yeah. So he was marking... Who was it? He was marking somebody. Anyway, actually, I won't name the person that they were marking, and he hit the deck. But Brawley says here, did he say something? Fan said he did. What was it? Fan says, I'd rather not say. Brawley, go on, you're amongst friends. Fan, he called me an effing leprechaun. Place explodes. To be with Fan reading the Sunday Independent today now would be interesting. We're not amongst friends anymore, Fan, but it's in the paper.
I'd say there was a few people spitting out their cornflakes this morning reading that.
His closing line is good as well. As club chairman Kieran McKeever and me sipped our pints afterwards, he gestured across the crowded hall and said, Brawley, this is Ireland.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, no, it is really good. Full of warmth and all the good stuff in the GA. We are very hard on the organisation, and we'll get into John Horan's interview in a while, but geez, there's lots of good stuff as well when we choose to look at it, isn't there?
And just another thing on Shane O'Donnell as well, like he made the point that he also realised everything that the GA gave him in terms of qualities, like, you know, leadership and just confidence, and that things that he was able to bring to Harvard with him and use to his advantage as well. So he was positive about so much of the GA as well, just negative about that one experience that changed his life.
Well, I'm pleased that the incredibly good-looking, intelligent, athletic Shane O'Donnell doesn't have a confidence problem. Now, next segment, if we go from sense of unity, let's go to the other end of the spectrum. And we should say at the outset, nobody on this paper review means to cause anyone offence. These are difficult topics to talk about live on air, so we're doing it with a sense of open-mindedness and just trying to see things from all sides. And it relates to Israel Folau and subsequently Billy Vunipola. And I think, certainly Vincent, I know you said it, it was definitely my sense as well, it's probably the best piece in the papers today, and it's Rory Keane in the Mail on Sunday, and he has done an exclusive interview with the former Samoa International. He's now CEO of the Pacific Rugby Players Welfare Organisation. So that's a professional players' union, effectively, that supports 600 members throughout Europe. So Dan Leo is a former test lock for Samoa, but now CEO of the Pacific Rugby Welfare Organisation. And it's all in the wake of the Folau furore. So basically in May, hundreds of Pacific Island rugby players and their families are going to make the pilgrimage to Lords, and it's going to be what Rory says is an historic 3-day summit, obviously centred around Christianity. That's deeply embedded in the culture of the Pacific Islands, as Rory writes. And it's spearheaded by Dan Leo, who's the former test lock for Samoa and CEO of the Pacific Rugby Players Welfare. Effectively, This is an interview with him. And he starts off by making the point, religion a huge factor in our community. It has been since our discovery a couple of 100 years ago. But even before that, we were very spiritual people. And it seems that over the course of this summit in Lords, they're going to talk about social media and how to handle it. Like he says, I just saw Bundyaki saying, I like something that I didn't read, which is something we can all be guilty of, you know. But he goes on to talk about the culture, really. I think that's the heart of this piece, is it gives us a much deeper understanding of the culture, the Samoan culture, the Pacific Islander culture. So he says, some of the more conservative mentalities have been shaped over hundreds of years, and unfortunately, it's going to take a while for us to come out of them. There's going to be mistakes along the way. We need some tolerance for our community as those mistakes are made, as people ask for other sections of the community. Hopefully they can be afforded. And I think that, Vincent, is his jumping off point, that this has been our culture for hundreds and hundreds of years. The world now, particularly in the last 15 years, with the advent of the internet and social media and smartphones, is changing at a pace none of us can keep up with. We're going to need some time here. There are going to be mistakes. I think that's his jumping off point.
What I really, really like about this piece, and fair play to Rory Keane for getting the interview, it's a really interesting, rational interview by this guy, Dan Leo. And it shines a light into the Polynesian culture. And I was 100% ignorant of that culture. And you know, I think most of us are. We look at Samoa and Tonga as these islands that produce these improbably huge young men who go and get rugby careers, and a lot of them then wear Australia and New Zealand jerseys down the line. And I think the fallout to the Israel Folau and Billy Vunipola stuff, there's been this argument being made that, you know, and I can see, for example, Frano in the Sunday Independent says, if the game celebrates diversity, well then we must welcome our Polynesian brothers. However, in the push for diversity and inclusivity, we must also understand that they can be mutually exclusive. Sometimes people's diversity does not countenance inclusiveness, or for some are all minorities. And the core beliefs of a lot of Polynesian people might not fit in with everyone else's views. Now, I would have actually agreed with that. I would have said, yeah, my impression of Polynesian views would be almost Archbishop McQuaid, very old school view of Christianity and how you live your life. And even David Walsh then has a line about interviewing the Vunipola brothers a few years ago, and Billy and Mako's mum Singa would read from scripture. Before going to bed, they would sing a hymn, and you're kind of thinking, yeah, but maybe we need to understand this. But here we find that there is a level of tolerance and engagement with even transgender issues that we couldn't have imagined. And in Samoa, for example, Rory writes, the country recognises the role of the fafina, or I don't know if I'm, a third gender. Dating back to the early 20th century, the term means in the way of a woman. The aforementioned Tulagis, that would be Henry Tulagi, older brother of England midfielder Manu Tulagi in the Powerhouse number 8, they would have a trans sister, a brother who identifies as a woman. Her name is Julie. I nearly fell off my chair reading that. I had no idea that there was that level of tolerance and engagement with, if you like, the modern world in Polynesian culture. And in many ways, the reasonable nature of this interview from Dan Leo shines an even more unflattering light, in my view, on what Israel Folau tweeted and what Billy Vunipola took, because we're almost half defending them on the basis of ignorance and that they couldn't know better. And this tells me categorically they should know better, and they probably do know better.
Yeah, like Billy Vunipola went to Harrow.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Israel Folau, we can make the argument he's not particularly well educated, but Billy Vunipola, you're dead right. So this shines a very unflattering light on the two of them, I think.
I've been reading about the Fa'afafine culture in Samoa, so it's up to 1% of the population. So I mean, it's widespread. It's across all families. You're born male. You can be raised a female. You can identify with neither gender. You can identify with both genders, or a combination of male and female genders. And it's a respected culture.
Yeah, and been around for a long time.
Yeah, Dan Leo says that is the irony situation. They've been part of our culture, the Fifinas, that is, for a long time, and are still some of the most respected people in our communities. They're accepted at churches, they hold positions of leadership all across the country, and that was the irony afterwards. We've got a sort of paradox within the islands of Orthodox and traditional Christianity, but then on the flip side, we are very accepting of our transgender communities within our cultures. And he said, Billy Vunipola, he's probably got Fifina cousins. So does Israel Folau. They don't hate them. They're loved just like the rest of their brothers and sisters, but it's almost like you're programmed in. There's this saturation of religion to be one way and to present some things sometimes differently. He says that's one of the reasons we've got the highest suicide rates in the world in the Pacific Islands. And it goes on later on to talk about these mindsets have been ingrained forcefully and through violence. I know my father went to a Catholic school in Samoa. If you didn't abide by the 10 Commandments, you were then beaten with a big stick in the corner. Unfortunately, when you're raised like that, it can become a vicious circle. It can take a while to break down. That's the same as our Pacific Island cultures overseas as well. People say Folau was born in Australia, he's Australian. But if you're raised in a Pacific Island community in Sydney, where 99% of your peers are Pacific Islanders, and you've been raised in that church with those mentalities, you might as well be in the islands. So it'll make you stop and think.
He addresses as well that they're going to go to Lords and talk about issues, and one of them being social media. Is it too simplistic just to expect that it's a given for people to know, as he quotes here, that lots more people are looking at your posts than others? We need to be careful about what we're posting. You can't just randomly like pages or share things that you haven't read yourself. If you have done and are still feel strongly about it, that's your beliefs, and you still need to question yourself as to whether that's hurtful to other people. I just find it strange that they would have to explain that to people at this stage, especially when the likes of Billy Vunipola has been exposed to different cultures and is ingrained in an English rugby society where he's meeting all different types of people. And
I suppose you could argue the vast majority of Pacific Islanders aren't tweeting like this and aren't putting up these Instagram posts. There's always going to be a minority who'll do it. Maybe that's the point.
But they're such high profile.
I think both
people,
Folau and Vunipola, have been on the scene long enough to understand that you are held to a higher account when you're in the public eye, and they earn a lot of money by being in that public eye, and with that comes responsibilities because of the influence you can have. And the idea that they are somehow innocent or ignorant of...
And need education.
Absolutely.
Is it not right and wrong? That's what. That's another thing that struck me, that they feel they need to go to Lords now and explain this to people who are playing rugby overseas and are already ingrained in different cultures and meeting new people. Yeah,
that side of it is a bit simplistic nonsense, really, in my view. But I do think it's a really, really interesting piece by Rory, and well worth doing, because it shines a light, as I said, that hasn't been shone before.
No, absolutely. I presume the summit was organised long in advance of all this, and now they're trying very quickly to shoehorn this segment into the summit, how to behave on social media. But Folau did it last summer, and the strange thing is Vunipola would have seen the fallout last summer. And then
but it comes back
happened
to
again this year, and he goes again. So it's just...
I think it comes back to as well how certain sports people get a free pass if they're really good at their sport.
Sure.
They'll definitely get a second chance.
Well, it's interesting, the idea of Saracens doing something to potentially remove Vunipola from the Champions final. There's as much chance of that happening as snow falling out there today.
Yeah. It probably would have been the better move from their point of view to do that, but it's tricky. So, that's on page 80 and 81 of the Mail on Sunday, A Question of Culture. It's an interview with the CEO, Dan Leo. It's pretty interesting. Just give you a deeper insight into Pacific Islander culture. Neil Francis writing about it as well. And it's probably going to dominate the build-up to the final. Yeah,
there was an interesting part in Neil Francis' piece as well that got me, was that he contacted the IRFU on Thursday to ask what Bundy Aki is going to do about liking the post. Is there going to be anything? Are they going to investigate it? And then a few hours later, there is a statement, an apology, explanation of sorts. And sometimes I think Frano gets a bit of a a tough deal. Like, you know, he gets knocked down a little bit, but I think the reality is that he carries so much weight, and I'd say the fear of featuring in a Neil Francis article would make anybody act. As the statement seems to have come out it's very coincidental that it was a few hours after Neil Francis wrote his piece. But the thing about Neil as well is that he's always unpredictable, and I think I always look forward to see what line he's going to take on controversial pieces, because they're often not as I'd expect. But it was a good piece by him there. What
was the gist of his argument?
Neil is... He just kind of goes through the situation, and it's particularly at Bundy Aki, and the fact that he had kind of got away with it to a certain extent with the I didn't mean to like it, you know. So he always has something different with Neil, and there's a quote here that I'm looking for about the one actually that you read out, Vincent, in the push for diversity and inclusivity. You must always understand that they can be mutually exclusive. Sometimes people's diversity does not countenance inclusiveness for all minorities, the core beliefs. A lot of Polynesian people might not fit in with everyone else's views. Vunipola's explanation in his post was inarticulate and didactic. The general thrust of the post was innocuous. The issue here is really the like of Folau's post. I think he just doesn't give Billy Vunipola and Bundy Aki the free pass that they seem to be getting in a lot of other places.
Yeah, I think the short version is just going to be, don't say this stuff publicly. Like in the, well, we figured this stuff out, just don't be broadcasting this from your platform.
The best line in Frano's piece is the one where he talks about the Munster supporter coming on the pitch to confront Vunipola. It was faintly ridiculous that a man dressed in hush puppies would threaten one of the most powerful athletes in the world, and I think that sums it up perfectly.
Yeah. So are we going to take a short break, or we got a few more minutes? We are? Okay, we're going to continue with the paper review now for the next kind of 15-20 minutes or so. There's Paul Kimmage talking about some interesting chewing gum at the golf. There's a few pieces on Roy Keane's Punditry, one or two other rugby pieces, very interesting to with Jack Carty. So we're going to continue to do that on our social channels on Facebook and on Twitter and Periscope. You can catch us there if you want, or if you want to get the commentary of the match from Turf Moor, then just stay tuned to News Talk. Nathan Murphy's going to pick up on that in just a moment. So we'll continue here on our social channels. On the rugby front, just to finish off on it maybe then, something less complicated and treacherous is Jack Carty. Pretty interesting interview. You thought this was well worth a read, Marie? Yeah,
I am of the opinion that any time a sports person mentions the word process, I completely switch off, because I think it's a modern day cliche. We know now that everybody at an elite level sticks to a process, and that's part of how they achieve and win and compete. But what I like then is when you get a little bit of insight into this process, and that it's just not a throwaway comment about process. And we get that here from Jack Carty. He is very committed to the process, I have to say. But he just tells us a little bit about what's behind his process. He has a team of people that help him, and one of them is Rob Kelly, a performance coach who has worked extensively with golfers. And he gets neurofeedback from Kelly, and he describes it in detail, but Peter O'Reilly doesn't go into too much detail because there's too much to reproduce. But he has a headband that measures various types of brainwaves, and the computer program that trains him to be able to block out the conscious thoughts whenever he's lining up the shot. He says he doesn't want to suddenly be thinking about what he might have for dinner when he's kicking in front of thousands of people, and he's trying to tap into his subconscious and go through the process, because the process is embedded in the subconscious. But he says the lads slag him a little bit because he does put so much value on it. But he says he buys into the gimmicks in a big way, and one of them is recovery pyjamas. So he saw a documentary with Tom Brady, and Tom Brady had a pair of Under Armour recovery pyjamas, and he purchased them. And he also purchased a weighted blanket which increases restful sleep. It's something that's recommended for kids who've ADHD, so he does have gimmicks. I like that kind of nerdy sports science element of interviews sometimes, because it just gives you a little bit of insight into how far these players go just to get that 1% or the marginal gains. I also like there's a few other little bits that you take away from it, things that I didn't know about him. Soccer player, rugby player. He had trials with Southampton, and they fizzled out. He never heard about them again. And interestingly, it turned out that it was because his mum wanted him to do his leaving cert, and she said that there was transfer embargoes and they weren't happening. And at that time, his mother was secretary of the Hudson Bay Celtic, where he was playing, and he was ahead of Matt Doherty, who scored for Wolves the other night. So he must have been quite an accomplished footballer as well. So it was good. And also he's really good friends with John Cooney, which again, like little things that, you know, didn't realise they were best pals, but he speaks quite nicely about him as well in the piece, just saying that he's emotionally intelligent with the people around him. He knows how to motivate young players and motivate himself, so it's nice to see him talking up a rival.
He's obviously seriously talented. So, you know, 26 now. In the space of the last couple of months, he's got his 3 Six Nations appearances and jumped up the pecking order, but he was playing minor football with Roscommon. He was playing soccer to a point where Southampton want him for trial, and his parents lied to him about the trial not being possible. And he's on the Irish under-15s, and obviously he's fairly phenomenal at rugby as well. So serious talent. And
another point as well, he was asked about doing well in the Six Nations, and he was really honest about it as well, which is great. He said, from a selfish standpoint, I was delighted with how I went.
Joe Schmidt circling that quote right
I know.
now.
With the limited time that I had, I thought I observed what was happening on the pitch and added to it when I came on, and that was something I was very conscious of. So that was nice as well, because you don't always get that. I know it's only a small thing, but
don't drop your room key card, Jack.
No, no. Yeah. So I'm just thinking you could get some recovery pajamas to go with your new boots, and then you're probably well set for at least another 5 years.
This is all taking shape, Joe. This is all taking shape.
Hogan 2.0, the career's about to take off again. No, good on him. Still only 26 and seems to be putting a lot into it, and he's had a really remarkable season. So that's in the Sunday Times, and Ulster will play Connacht next Saturday at 5:15 on Air Sport in the Pro 14 for a place in the semi-final. It's hard to keep track of the Pro 14 format, isn't it?
Very much.
You really have to dig in deep. So yeah, playoffs for the semi-finals are next weekend. That's Jack Carty, Sunday Times, page 7. The Masters kind of features here. Paul Kimmage, page 7, comes up with an angle that wasn't fully expecting. We all saw, for instance, and we don't know the nature of the chewing gum, but I think everybody would have noticed Tiger Woods munching on chewing gum on the back nine on Sunday. Thought not too much of it. And now I'm thinking more of it. Now I want Woods to tell us exactly what he was chewing. All perfectly legal, we should stress.
Absolutely. To start with, what I love about this piece is the picture with it. And it's of, basically Paul is talking about his time caddying for Nick Faldo. And there's a picture of him standing beside Faldo, and Paul is throwing a blade of grass up into the air as if to read the wind for Faldo. But if you read the piece, you'll realise how he was floundering at the time, even to the extent of getting the muesli bar wrong. And
too much sugar, said
Too
Faldo.
much sugar. But it's funny, at the press conference after Tiger won the Masters, he was asked the question about chewing gum, and there were chuckles in the media room, you know, as if someone is actually so stupid as to ask him, did chewing gum help you? And I would have been that innocent Joe sitting there thinking, yeah, what an absurd question, you know. You read Paul's piece and suddenly you realise that it may not have been Wrigley's juicy fruit he was chewing. It may have been something very different. And it's basically something containing CBD, a non-intoxicating cannabinoid found in cannabis. Now, I am beginning to despair of sport. I go back to a time when there were winners and losers, and that was it, and it was a clean slate. But we are now at the point where he may have been, or this is the perception, the question rather, that's being asked, was he getting some kind of an advantage from the gum he was chewing? And did the gum maybe calm his nerves on the back nine, where in Augusta the back nine can be absolutely harrowing if you're up there? And maybe Francesco Molinari is currently looking for that gum and thinking I should have been chewing gum on the 12th when it all went wrong.
It seems he was alerted to this by what he calls a top-class amateur with aspirations of going pro. Hi Paul, past few weeks a marked increase in professionals chewing gum. I wanted to contact you, see if you were aware the PGA Tour recently issued an update on the use of CBD products the week before the Masters, warning them to be careful. And it seems there was a newsletter sent to the pros, obtained by a website called Marijuana Moment, and it was warning players basically to be advised that some CBD products, basically CBD has been taken off the WADA ban list in the last year, so this is totally legal. But they were letting the players know that some CBD products may also contain THC, and THC is still prohibited. THC is the part that gets you high, basically.
Which is hard to imagine that helping you playing golf.
I mean, if a player was like rubbing the grass and laughing, then you would presume some THC had snuck into their gum. And so Kimmich kind of goes, it seems, looking for a copy of the newsletter for the players, and the PGA Tour say the newsletter was confidential, only shared with eligible PGA Tour players, and therefore we're unable to share that information with third parties. We apologise. And he's talked to an insider, a player, and the player is saying that the players want it banned or they'll start taking it soon to level the playing field, which is kind of where it's at.
It will be interesting now to see what happens next, because I don't think any of us were aware of that this was a thing and that's what was happening. I hadn't seen it written anywhere before.
No.
So the follow-up now and the follow-up questions and press conferences.
Well, you can rest assured that Tiger is going to be asked about this.
It should be, yeah. Now, it's not illegal, you know, but the benefits of CBD are pain relief, anxiety relief, which again might be useful on the back of my gust, as you say, yeah. Appetite stimulation. I did hear him in an offhanded, jokey way now that I think about it. He was asked about gum. I don't know, was it the same press conference, but he did say, it stops him wanting to eat all the time.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Okay, so it turns out that one of the benefits of CBD is appetite stimulation. Oh, that's appetite stimulation. That's to make you hungry. Oh yeah, because the munchies. Okay, so appetite stimulation. Sorry, it doesn't suppress it. Nobody here inhaled, okay? Neil, stop. Mood management and more. But mood management could be something as well. So I guess, look, there probably is an advantage there, but if it's been taken off the WADA list, then, I don't know, is it?
I think we're in that grey area that we seem to be getting into an awful lot more these days.
Yeah. I guess you don't want to get to a point where 80% of the players are munching and chewing gum, and everybody is saying, I'm not sure about this.
And then online sales of it go through the roof, and everybody wants the chewing gum when they're out golfing. Yeah,
because he's sort of, I think that's, I don't think Paul at the end of the piece is saying this is outrageous. He's almost making the point, does this look right? You know, there have been times, said the tour pro, when I've witnessed sporting events that have left me emotionless. Maradona, the hand of God, Ben Johnson and his bloodshot eyes, Tonya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan, it didn't feel or look right. And golfers taking CBD doesn't feel or look right. That's kind of the point, I suppose.
You see, what you're looking at here is what happens next? Where does the development of this gum go? You know, and who is going to be in control of that development? You know, it's just, the moment you get to this issue of what can be in any way remotely performance enhancing, even if it's legal, is it morally right? Are you playing to the spirit of the game if you're looking for something like that? And people will always do it, of course they will. You know, I'm playing golf tomorrow, I'd love to try it, just to see what it would do for me. I'd be curious to see what it would do for me. But where's it going?
The start of a column right there, Vincent.
Everything's the start of a column,
Well, no, it's true. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Woods may well turn around and say, yeah, I was taking CBD chewing gum. My back is in a bad way. It helps with the pain relief. Stops me having to take so many painkillers. Who knows? You know, we don't know. Yeah. And it's not. This is not just.
But when
Woods.
something's not on the list, like, people find a way to justify it. I mean, I know it's not comparable, but Maria Sharapova and meldonium, like, that wasn't on the WADA list. She said she needed it for health reasons. Yeah. It's on the list. She fails, and then everybody's talking about meldonium. Is this something that's going to go?
Going into the area of pain management in rugby, and I mean, this whole area is just leading in one direction, and it's not a good direction.
No, there's a general sense across sport. You're going up to the line and you're taking it as a matter of course. And if it's legal, well, it's legal. End of discussion. And people are going to do that because they want every advantage they can.
Of course,
you know? But it's interesting. So if you were wondering what players were chewing, there's a possibility that was it. Maybe it was Wrigley's for 5 hours.
Maybe it was.
We don't know. Did you enjoy the Masters?
Loved it. It's such a magical place to go to, Joe. And in a selfish way, Tiger winning, it was such an easy story to write. It just, I mean, I was actually thinking, with about an hour to go, if Patrick Cantlay wins, I've got to go to Google. Even if Xander Schauffele wins, I've got to go to Google. I don't cover a lot of golf. So to me, the story, the redemptive story of Tiger winning, it just was an easy one to write. And then we had the extra bonus of the extra time, because with the storm supposedly coming in, they started so early.
Yeah.
So the Masters was ending at 7:30 Irish time instead of 11:30 Irish time.
Yeah.
Which for a newspaper writer was just a dream.
It all fell into place for you.
It really did, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And people have made the point that there's nothing redemptive about Woods or his story. And it's definitely a viewpoint you can make a strong argument for, and you can take different bits of evidence. Where are you in that whole area?
I don't think you have to like him as a person to actually just find the story utterly compelling. I mean, if you can take it at face value, that you go back 2 years that he was barely able to walk, couldn't find comfort lying down, to what he is now, if you can take that at face value, it's one of the greatest comeback stories in the history of sport. I mean, I thought I couldn't see him doing it in Augusta 11 years after his last major, because I think to go that amount of time without bringing it home, regardless of what he did in East Lake last September and that, no, I couldn't see him doing it. But I was watching him on the Sunday morning on the putting green, and he had the red shirt on, and he was so deliberate in everything he was doing, and he was stone-faced, and he was chewing the gum, and he was incredibly slow in everything he was doing. It was going to be at his pace, and it was like he was sending a message to Molinari, I'm in control of this. And when they were walking up the first fairway, I remember looking behind them, and Finau and Molinari and the three caddies were about 50 yards ahead of Tiger, who was walking on his own very slowly, like almost to the point where you're thinking, is there something wrong with his back? This doesn't look right. But he was playing the mind games even at that stage, that this is me in red on a Sunday, and I'm going to do it. And like Molinari sank that putt on the first, and you're thinking, you're not going to get rid of this guy easily, Tiger.
It's impenetrable.
And he really had to wait until the 12th before he could do it. And the moment Molinari put that ball in the water on the 12th, you're thinking, and Tiger himself said it, this tournament has just flipped. This has changed dramatically. What we saw with him after that, the shot on 16 to just nail it, putting his tee shot to a foot or whatever it was, I don't know, in world sport, is there a tougher competitor than Woods? And the fact that he can come back 14 years after his last Masters, 11 years after his last major, and do what he did, and to see his two children running to him, I found myself getting emotional.
Yes.
I don't necessarily think he's a particularly nice person. In fact, I think he's a sociopath, probably. And we've all read the books about his meanness, and his treatment of his wife was just shocking, beyond shocking. And yet I so wanted him to win. I don't know why. I so wanted that story. Maybe selfishly as a journalist, but also I just wanted him to win.
No, I know. I heard Malachy Kirkland on his At a Time podcast totally almost voice this weird relationship I have with Woods too, where he was saying he was watching him last year reading the Armin Katayan book, going, God, this guy's an arsehole. God, he's an arsehole. And then looking up, watching Woods and going, go on, Tiger, go on.
Yeah.
There's this weird, I don't know what it is,
separation,
contradiction.
Yeah.
I don't have it at all.
Woods and the art. Well, you used the word artistry in your piece on Monday, which I think captured just I don't know how we can compartmentalise the genius and the awfulness, and somehow he seems separate from it when he's on the golf course. I don't know how, it doesn't make sense. But I also kind of was willing him to do it, and found the bit with his children a redemptive and nice for them as well, and that family's been through hell. I found all that powerful, and I thought his reaction was more vociferous than I expected it to be when he won. I thought, God, maybe it revealed a little bit more that he actually has been in such a horrific place, because he really milked it. I thought maybe he's revealing just how bad it's got for him, and I kind of, it all combined, and I did think, God, there is something amazing about this. But then 3 days on, I do still concede he's probably an asshole.
I just, like you, Vincent, as a journalist, I appreciated the story, but that was it. I thought, okay, that'll be nice now for everyone over there to cover that, but I didn't feel anything. I don't know why I couldn't get on board with him. Like, there's other sports people that have not been the best human beings ever, and fine, but I don't know what it was about Tiger. I think maybe...
Was that throughout his career, Marie?
Since the incident since everything came to pass about what he was really like, maybe it's because I am a mother and a wife and I completely relate to Elin. I don't know what it is, but I couldn't celebrate the bad guy. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a female perspective is maybe very different to our perspective on this. And, you know, I read the book, the dual co-writers book, on holidays in January, and my wife said, "Is that any good?" And I said, "Yeah, I can't put it down. It's just the forensic detail is extraordinary." But I wasn't sure she'd read it, but she read it, and she read it in one sitting. She just could not put it down because his story is just beyond belief.
Beyond belief,
it really is beyond belief. Now, she thinks he's utterly obnoxious, and I can see that, and I don't think Joe and I are arguing for a second that he's not. But there is something almost once in a lifetime about what he's bringing to golf. And I think for the sport of golf, you can see the reaction of fellow competitors. They know that this is after giving the game an extraordinary lift.
And I appreciate all of that. And, you know, golf is back. The trending on Twitter, I imagine that he's going to be on the front of all the next video games and kids are going to want to be him. But when I watched it, I didn't feel anything. I just thought...
It's totally fair. I mean, it really is. He's a very polarising figure. See,
I just thought, what's really happening here? You know, as in we're seeing all this, we're seeing him hugging the kids, the emotion, but what's really happening underneath that? Is that the true reflection of his relationship with his family? Like, I was thinking, what does Elin think of this?
You see, at that moment, Marie, I wasn't thinking that deeply.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this in terms of sport. And as a sports writer writing the sports story, and I totally agree with you, there may be an underlying cynicism to having the children there and the young boy wearing a night top, and I get all of that.
Yeah.
But in terms of sports stories that you can cover or that you can witness, I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime story. This is a level of redemption in terms of your ability to do what you're known for and what you've made your name on, to come back from where he was. I can't think of a comparable. I mean, people have talked about Ben Hogan and...
beats Ben Hogan into the ground.
Absolutely. This has just gone to another stratosphere, and that's what I was taken with. And writing it, I wasn't making any moral judgments, and I did make the point in the piece that I don't think people want him to be a social worker, or they're not looking for a side to him that is kind or generous or decent. They're looking for that stare, and they're looking for that incredible competitive aggression which he brought to bear. And it's very, very rare to see that.
I did think of Elin, I must say.
Really?
I really...
Did you?
I thought penny for her thoughts right now.
Maybe, like, you were there, Vincent, as well, so it's different than sitting at home watching it on the TV and watching the build-up and, you know, the cutaways. It is a little bit... you're a little bit removed from it, I think, and maybe if I was there, I would have been caught up in it and would have seen the stare and the rest. But sitting at home on the couch, I just couldn't get on board with it.
Yeah, I guess it depends probably to what extent you think the fallout from marriage, the lying in bed for 2 years, the surgeries, realising probably he had no friends, realising he probably wasn't very highly regarded by people who didn't know him that well either. On some level, he must engage with the pain he's caused his children and is going to cause them as they begin to discover the internet in a big way. And he's ageing. Do you think he cannot be touched by all of that, like changed in some small way? I kind of find it hard to believe he's still the same arrogant, terrible person he was at 30.
I would also make the point that very few sports people in the history of sport have had their flaws so scrutinised and parsed, and the most forensic detail about how big a creep he is or was, whichever. You compare it to Arnie Palmer, one of the most loved figures in sport, but a known ladies' man, and used to go off to the Playboy Mansion, and all of this is common knowledge. And yet Arnie is
Mr.
loved.
Palmer.
Yes, Mr. Palmer. And like there's a bit of a contradiction in how we view the two, because sport was never as scrutinizing in Arnold's time as it is now. And like, but if Woods can still trigger that reaction in people when everybody knows how big a creep he is, or was, well then, do you know, I think you just have to accept you're witnessing something remarkable.
Yeah, it was a good story.
Right, let's go from one divisive figure to someone who everyone has an opinion on, Roy Keane. There are a few pieces referencing Keane's re-emergence as a pundit during the week on Sky Sports. Roy Curtis in the Sunday World's got a really good piece, which I suspect he enjoyed writing. Like, it's just kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a terrific piece.
And Shane McGrath's making the point, you know, he's saying Jonathan Walters tweeted when he saw Roy Keane was on the Wednesday night that he's going to put the TV on mute. And Shane McGrath's almost making the point, well, buddy, you know, you might want to take your leaf or two out of his book. Is your punditry that electrifying? But
and you've had to mute for days and days afterwards because everybody's been talking about it as well. It's really...
What match? I mean, I was away and I couldn't watch the match. I was desperate to watch the match. But when I heard Keane was on, I went onto YouTube just to watch the pre-game, the halftime and the post-game. I haven't watched the match back yet, but I made sure to watch Roy Keane.
And the reactions and the eye rolls, and he just totally exasperated as well, which is... I love when he's exasperated.
I think Roy he describes Keane as the Sid Vicious of Sky, and it really, it's a brilliantly written piece by Roy, but they transpose the Sid Vicious hairstyle on Roy's head, which I'm not sure Roy Keane will like that. But Roy Curtis writes, "Here is the nub of the dispute. There is a school of modern analysis that insists the truth of every performance can only be found in statistical breakdowns, in the painstaking unravelling of the tactical threads. Keane spoke for many of us who believe such absolutism to be nonsense, that it doesn't require a GPS system to tell when somebody isn't up for the fight. As Keane said, 'My eyes don't lie to me.' Neville went off on a tangent like one of those supercilious wine buffs, appalled that you didn't appreciate the rosy undertones and hints of oak cask." It's a brilliantly written piece.
It is.
And it just captures the sense of Gary Neville, who's so comfortable in front of the camera, but is different when Roy Keane is sitting beside him. So you have the Neville-Carragher two-ball job that just dominate Sky's coverage of football, and yet they know their place when Roy Keane sits in the studio. And you could see Neville was just like a giggling schoolboy almost beside him.
You're always telling me off, he said. You're going to tell me off anyway.
Yeah.
And it did give a little bit of a insight into the relationship as well, like back in the day when they were playing together, like Roy was the main man.
Well, there is that famous thing in the tunnel with Vieira where Roy is defending Gary Neville because someone was bullying Neville in the tunnel, and Roy is fighting the fight for him. Yeah. So I mean, nothing has changed in that relationship.
The most forgotten and best line in that encounter was he said, "Pick on someone your own size."
Exactly.
Roy Keane towering over Gary Neville.
I loved when he was telling him, I think it was Fred that didn't chase back, and you know, Gary, it's 2 yards, man. And the way he said it was brilliant.
In saying that, I think sometimes Roy can be over the top in his punditry, and you know, he had a go at Shaw over the Bernardo Silva goal. I think the shot went between Shaw's legs. I mean, you know, sometimes that happens, and Bernardo Silva is a brilliant player. Now, I did think Shaw throwing his arms up as if, what could I do? But it wasn't as if he wasn't there.
Yes.
The ball went between his legs. Like, you know.
The general consensus everyone seems to have is that Roy Keane wiped the floor with Gary Neville. John Giles said as much here on Thursday even. He said, like, Gary Neville was talking nonsense, and, you know, Graham Souness kind of saying, but there were only 53 minutes gone. Like, what do you mean? They were tired. Am I the only one who thought that Neville was offering at least a level of insight in that moment, in that he was saying, look, I've been there and I faced these kinds of players, and there can just come a point where maybe it is 53 minutes in, although I appreciate they're supposed to be elite athletes, but he was almost saying, I've been there, and there are times where you're just like, oh, and those 2 yards start to feel like a long way away. And okay, Roy Keane, of course, is going to win the populist vote by going, Gary, it's 2 yards, man, come on. But like, there's no insight in that. That's just Keane saying, well, everything should be perfect. And I thought Neville was almost trying to say, I've been that soldier, and I know, look, Roy, you're right, I'm not saying that a good night, but this is the inside. I've been in that moment, and it can be tough, and you get a bit tired and you get a bit wrecked. And, you know, I can see how everyone's watching is going, no, pampered footballers. But I thought there was a degree of insight there.
Well, could you not imagine that maybe is why Roy Keane will never make it in management?
Totally. And it's why, actually, I am firmly of the opinion that Roy Keane's not a good pundit. I thought Wednesday evening was set up so perfectly for him because, you know, he's a cultural architect. And the story from the Everton game was not about 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. It was not about shape. It wasn't about all tactical insight. It was about attitude. And it was about working hard for the team and honesty. And like, if Roy Keane can cover any topic, it's attitude and honesty. So I thought it was just set up. It was like popped up for him to just smash it.
Well, people have this impression of Roy Keane as someone who just goes in and tells it like it is, and that there's no ego at play here. There is a huge ego at play, and there's an ego at play in his general demeanour when he was on duty with the Irish team, or that this John Wayne, I'm so hard I'll stare anyone down over, you know, you ask me what you're having on the menu and I'll give you the stare. There's a huge sense of his own public self there all the time with Roy, and I think he would have gone in very, very much with the intention of finding a loophole in something Gary Neville said, because his relationship with Neville in that Manchester United dressing room was always, he was the senior guy and Neville would do what he was told.
Yeah.
Roy would never lose that, and he would never go in there feeling him and Gary Neville are equals, and that was clear from the off that he was ready to pounce on Neville the moment he got an opportunity. Maybe he wasn't entirely fair. It didn't matter. It was the Roy Keane show, and he knew it was the Roy Keane show, and he knows this morning Sky will pay big bucks to get him back there.
Yeah, I mean, what they've made in just marketing terms has paid his fee 20 times over, I would think. And look, I appreciate he's right in many ways, and like you can't say what Manchester United did was well. So in the main, I'm with him, but I just thought there was, at least Neville was trying to give a degree of insight that Roy wasn't even trying to give. It was just like, it's just bad. He wasn't explaining why it was bad.
I think sometimes that's what we want, though. We just want to be entertained. We want somebody that will actually tell us what they're thinking and what we're probably thinking, and not go to, I think Roy mentioned it, to the fancy machine and start showing us replays. That we just want people called out. And
but even his line about them throwing hair gel at each other after the Everton defeat, I mean, you're thinking he had planned saying
that's what I was wondering as well. Yeah, like that.
100%. 100%. Yeah. And like, he's totally, I'm even starting to think he's aware of GIFs. I mean, the eye rolls.
Yeah.
I think there's that secretly on Twitter, and I think he understands the power of that's going to take
I did
off.
wonder when he was with the Ireland team as well about the beard, and, you know, the timings of growing the beard and shaving the beard, and maximum impact as well for pictures.
Like the beard, so he realises first time it gets commented upon.
Yeah.
It's not the last we see of the beard. You know, he was the Tuesday press conferences.
I actually thought the most interesting body language in that studio was Joe Hart, who looked absolutely terrified.
Whatever about Neville, it was the first time there was a softening of Graham Souness as well. Like, even he was a little bit like,
careful now.
we're support actors here.
Yeah. I'm not the one with the teeth here,
Yeah, totally. But it's great, fascinating TV. I thought Neville held his ground as much as he could while feeling a bit intimidated. And
he didn't make it uncomfortable viewing either. I thought he made it entertaining viewing, and, like, you know, brought us in because he was so relaxed about it as well, and, you know, it wasn't cringy.
Yeah. Roy Curtis said he's clearly not a fan of Gary Neville, you know. Although he just said he's a fluent, often insightful voice, but not immune from talking hogwash. But he talked about him as a sultan of smug, Gary Neville. Do you like Neville?
I like Neville. Do you know what? You talk about forgiving people things, and I'm a mad Liverpool fan.
Okay.
But Jamie Carragher, I can't warm to ever since that spitting incident. I really cannot forgive him for that. And there are things there's a threshold for me. I'm sorry, I can't warm to you. I've never actually warmed.
There's people right now going, he loves Tiger Woods.
I'm just going to put my pen down now.
But I mean, spitting, no.
I accept Tiger Woods' creep, but what Carragher did, I can't forgive him for it. I just can't.
It's an ingrained image, the Carragher one, isn't it?
Yeah.
The big white gob coming at you, So are there any last stories that we kind of didn't touch on and we said we would? John Horan in the Mail on Sunday does a pretty interesting interview in the Mail on Sunday, like the gist of which is he's hopeful of having a second-tier football championship by as early as 2020, which seems ambitious, but that'd be interesting. Certainly they're not going to open up the local grounds. He won't talk about the Colmkill situation up in Donegal, where the club were hit with an 8-week ban and a €500 fine for hosting a soccer fundraiser, because that's in the process of a hearing at the moment. But he said in general terms they are absolutely 100% not going to open up club grounds to other activities. That's not going to happen. County grounds obviously has happened with Linden Miller. And then it was, they're not going to release the salary of the Director General. They don't want to be seen as almost trying to embarrass embattled officials in the FAI was the point there. CPA, he says he's engaging with to a point. He's met with them over a year ago, and they're going to set up a fixtures group. That's going to happen. I think that's kind of the headline points on it.
Yeah.
He talks about how embarrassing the ban on foreign training camps proved for them last year, and it was because
everyone had one.
Well, it's common knowledge that a lot of teams who went on holidays or cultural trips, please. But like, how do you police it? I mean, there's no point in having a rule if you can't police it.
And in fairness, he did say some people got away with it, which they did.
Yeah, well, the bizarre thing is that some people didn't, because I mean,
others didn't.
Particularly when you have individual county boards that are saying, yeah, okay, we'll do this, we'll facilitate this. Your own organisation is doing this, and you have a rule that you can't police. It's just absurd.
Yeah, it's a bit like Catholicism, where there's an a la carte attitude to the rules. And in GAA, payments to managers, foreign trips, we don't believe in that. We believe in the other stuff.
1 month suspensions.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. So that's worth a read if you want to dig deeper into John Horn. I haven't seen him anywhere else with Philip Lanigan in the Mail on Sunday. I think that's about it, unless there's anything else you've read today or in the last few days you want to nudge people towards.
I think that's me covered anyway.
That's it.
Okay. It's the full spectrum on the pay-per-view today. So you can podcast it in the usual places, as I know many of you do, or we're back next week. So my thanks to Vincent and Marie. That's the pay-per-view for this week.